Yeah, it looks like it. I am. Yeah, 1 second. Of course, excuse me, because it's always the first click that goes the wrong way. Okay, thanks a lot, Lauren. Happy to be back with Healthy Seminars for this live webinar. That's the first time I do a webinar. The other were courses that were recorded. And yeah, research is something that makes me excited. And this webinar is interesting because we all know as therapists that acupuncture is safe. We do have some side effects, and we'll go through them. Perhaps some safety issues that once in a while we hear about or we personally experience. But of course, again, in the broad context of the profession and of the countries that we live in, most of us, unless there are attendants here from China, we have to justify our profession in many ways or explain what the needles do. And many times we need to explain also how safe it is. And there are a lot of questions that come up. How safe is acupuncture for specific populations, within a hospital setting, with people with serious chronic diseases, with people who are taking certain drugs, with certain populations like very young people, children and babies, very old people as well. And so what I've gathered in this 2-hour webinar is a summary of the evidence that comes up in several, in certain studies. It is, I think, the most up-to-date collection of research that specifically talks about how safe, because every study that is being done and published on acupuncture will also say whether there were some safety issues or not. But the idea of this presentation is to look at summary of the data from a large amount of studies in order for you to see the numbers. And then the second part of the presentation, we'll try to put it in context of what happens in Western medicine, because this is the setting that most of us are living in. When doctors ask us, how does this compare to, hopefully by the end of this webinar, you will have the answer to these questions. So let's have a look at what we'll be looking at. First of all, I want to start off with a quick view. It's only going to be 2 slides. You have it in your handouts on how acupuncture is being perceived, or how are we doing in the media. Usually it comes up with the perception on efficacy, but sometimes there is also a discussion on the safety of acupuncture. And it's interesting to see how we perceive. Now, of course, this is not for individual countries. This is what is available in the media. Generally speaking, what is hitting the news via Twitter, Facebook, major publications. And then we'll go very quickly through research basics, because since I'm referring to research studies, I want to make sure that everyone is on the same page when I talk about some of the terms that are related to research. Then, of course, we'll review all the data that I've collected from the last 5 years. And then, like I said, we'll switch on to see how Western medicine, drugs and practice are doing in context, in order to see where we stand compared to them. And of course, then we'll summarize and hopefully get as many questions as you have. I just want to make one comment, that the research that I've collected for this is mostly from the last 5 to 7 years, and many of them actually from the last year or two. There is some safety data that comes in from the 90s of the previous century, and even the 80s, that I've ignored. The reason is that the way studies were conducted then and the way they were reported were probably of lesser quality than what we see nowadays. And I think that reviewing data, I think that even if you talk to other health professionals and start coming out with data from the 80s and the 90s, people will tell you, well, this is not really interesting. What do you have now to tell me? So that's why the majority of this presentation and the majority of the studies will be from the last 2 years. Some of them will go up to 5 or even 7 years, if I remember correctly. So let's begin. Where does acupuncture stand in the media? This is what I've tried to see. I try to take this snapshot a few times a year because I teach research, not only safety, but efficacy in several therapeutic areas in Israel and in other parts of the world. And overall, it's been a good year in the media. First of all, as most of you know, Chinese medicine is now an official profession according to the WHO, and I know that the WHO is now under scrutiny from the US administration, mainly maybe other countries in the world. But the WHO is now officially accepted Chinese medicine and provided a system of documenting the way we diagnose and the way we correspond with regard to diseases. Now, of course, this is very relevant in countries like the US, for example, where you have to fill in the way you've diagnosed for insurance purposes. It's less relevant in other countries of the world, but once it was published, of course, there was some positive reviews on the fact that it's actually making it into clinics all around the world. Of course, we have some celebrities that are doing the work for us, and they're very important. We have here the ex princess that is now living, I don't know where she's living now, somewhere in North America. And she talked about the fact that she suffered from migraine when she was a child, and perhaps a mother or father, I don't know who, chose to be treated for migraines with acupuncture, which is very important because whether you're interested in the royal family or not, there are people who follow other people. Celebrities especially. Angelina Jolie spoke about the fact that for her Bell's palsy, she received acupuncture, and that was very important as well. During the week that she spoke about it, Bell's palsy was the most searched term on Google. So just to show you the influence when someone actually talks about acupuncture and a certain disease that many people have not heard or didn't know that it was called Bell's palsy. And below that you have Novak Djokovic, #1 tennis player in the world, tweeting about receiving acupuncture with moxibustion after every game that he was playing during the US Open in Flushing Meadow in New York in September, I think August or September, end of August. And so again, a celebrity that talks about the benefits and perhaps the fact that it doesn't look that pretty, but it actually does help him and does the work. We have other headlines that are coming up. For example, the fact that due to the opioids crisis, which we'll be talking about later, veterans are looking for acupuncture to